can look like we're talking if we want to. And it'll show up on there. Like I said, you can watch the.
Well, I learned from a friend that showed me why. Instead of asking why, start asking why not. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're lying in the sun. Bit by bit, the older that we get, the faster it tick, 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 ticks. Time flies. Whoa, whoa, time flies.
All right, time flies. That's right. It sure does when you're having fun, doesn't it?
It does.
We want to thank Dennis Beck for that intro music. Dennis, always enjoy listening to that to begin our show. Dennis Beck and a lot of Marshfield friends, I think, participated in that a few years ago, and we really appreciate being able to do that. So I'm Lyndall Fraker. We're here again with Marshfield's Old School Times, and we're happy to have a couple of local yokels here with us today. Linda Blazer and Linda Dickinson. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You betcha. Thank you for coming. Linda was here the other day, Linda Dickinson, with her mom and dad, Don and Leona Rost, but yet we didn't really have a lot of time to talk about the Historical Society and some of the things, Linda, that you've accomplished. So I wanted to have you come back, and then, of course, it was a natural to ask Linda Blazer to be on here with you because the two of you have led the Historical Society, I guess, as pretty much the only directors it's ever had as far as the building, at least for many, many years. So we really appreciate your service and all that the Historical Society does for our community. It's quite a treasure, and I know you've put enormous amount of time and volunteer work into that. And Linda, you are now doing that job, and of course your mom and dad have done that as well over the years. So we really appreciate it. It's a treasure for sure.
It's a job.
Yeah, I know it is.
And I will never fill Linda's shoes.
Well,
Oh my goodness.
she did a phenomenal job, and I know you get a lot of stuff. I mean, you get stuff, and you've archived it. You've got the extra building over there now. From when you started, you only had the library building, and now you have the other one. And but we'll get into that a little bit later. I want to start out by just saying, this show is meant to be here to document history, and that's what these ladies do. That's what they've done all for many years now, is to document history and to preserve history and make sure that future generations can understand, our culture and why Marshfield and Webster County is the way it is. And I think it's so important. And I'm just honored to be able to do this, to be able to continue that in a different format maybe, but one that I think many find entertaining and many find maybe a little bit interesting. And so that's what we're going to try to do. And we're going to have a very wide range of guests on the show. We've got several lining up this fall that are going to come on, and I think you'll really enjoy their contributions to our community and to the show as well. But today we're going to talk to Linda, and we're going to start out with Linda Blazer. Linda, I'd like for you to just kind of introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were raised, your folks, your family, and so forth.
Okay. Well, my name is Linda Blazer, and I'm married to Bill for 60 years now.
Wow.
That's great.
Phenomenal. Congratulations.
Thank you. Just passed this May. And I was born up towards the top of Northview Hill, which my mom and dad were both from that area too. And Daddy just tenant farmed. We lived there, and then we lived up in the edge of Springfield, and then over on the edge of just south of Rogersville. I attended Rogersville School. And then when I was in the 8th grade, we moved over to the farms. First time that Daddy had a farm. And that's still the home place right there, So
Wow.
my dad was Gilbert Cruz. My mom was Mary Kammerer, German family. And Daddy was into history. He loved history, and he served with the Historical Society back in the day. He always wanted to have a museum, and there wasn't any way that they could at that time. But I remember taking him to a doctor's appointment one time, and as we drove by the building, he said, "I understand the Historical Society is going to be getting that building." He wasn't able to go to the meetings anymore, but he was pleased,
Oh, that's awesome.
that. So I attended high school here. I was the first one of my generation. Daddy graduated here, but I was the first one of my family generation to attend here and graduate. And there was 10 in my family. I'm number 4.
Wow.
5 boys and 5 girls. And so I felt very blessed to live in this community and attend Marshfield High School, graduate here, and be in the community. And it's such a great place for anyone to live and be reared. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
the Midwestern ideals and things that we live by.
Absolutely. So you know, the Cruz family is a very prominent Webster County name, family from way back, and so you're part of that group, you might say. Different, you know, branches, you might say, but definitely Northview community. A lot of Cruzes up that direction.
The Welches. My grandmother Cruz was a Welch, and I mean, half the counties probably trace their ancestry to the Welches because there was 13 kids. Bumgarners also on the Cruz side. My great-grandmother Cruz was a Bumgarner, and again, huge family. Between those two families and the Allens, most of them came in the 1830s,
Wow.
40s, and so yeah.
You know when the Cruzes came?
I think about 1840,
About
thereabouts.
40s.
And the most recent one of my family to come was on my mother's side when the Camerers came in 1880, thereabouts. But anyway, my grandmother Cameron was an Allen, and they had come in the 1830s.
Right. Several buried at the Northview Cemetery? Or
Welch
Welch
is our
Cemetery,
family
yeah.
cemetery, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my great-grandfather Welch was first to give the land for
Give
the
the land.
cemetery, yes.
Awesome. Well, Linda, how about you? Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself? And
Homegrown and raised.
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
And we are first cousins, just for the
we are,
record.
Yes.
Probably covered that when your mom and dad were on.
Oh. But yeah, I went to school here. I graduated in 1970, and I have one son, Jason Rost,
Mhm.
and he has complete realty, and 2 grandkids, Josie and Johnny. And,
Mhm.
so they're kind of my pride and joy now.
Absolutely. You're married to Kenny.
Married to Kenny. Yeah, he's actually a Wright County guy.
Right.
And live in Hartville, so I make lots of trips up 38.
Linda, you became the director of this historical society how long now?
About 2 years.
2 years, and that's when, Linda, when you retired.
Yes.
And we have Linda Lou and Linda Jean, by the way. Just in case. And then Linda Lou, you were how long as the director?
22 years.
22 years.
I will not make it that long.
Well, you never know.
You never know, that's for
So,
sure.
tell us just a little bit about the beginning of this, the facility over there. This historical society was formed, I guess, in the 70s, maybe 60s
Actually,
or 70s.
in 1952,
52?
as a spearhead to celebrate the centennial.
Go ahead and start there and
And,
tell us a little bit
yes,
about it.
and
Yeah.
it was a big event, and we have a list of the charter members there on the wall. And I mean, it was a huge, you know, maybe you all are a little bit too young to remember that, but that was a big event.
Yeah.
And it was active for a few years, and then it kind of dwindled to where there wasn't having meetings or anything for several years. And in the early 70s, they started starting up again, and that's when my dad was involved in that time. And there are just several local people who were very active in the Historical Society in the 70s.
Right.
And they started publishing the journals, and they didn't have a home anywhere. They didn't have funds, of course, none whatsoever, and that stayed that way, and it was kind of, for a few years, but it got kind of revived, and they got their bylaws and everything, and became a tax-free society, a 501c3, and Pauline Dyke was very helpful with that. Stan Whitehurst, they worked hard at getting that done. And that was about the time that I got involved then. My dad had passed away in 96, and so I had a little more time then. And I began to get involved, and they were publishing the 2-volume history book.
Yeah, we just happen to have copies here, the
Yeah.
green book we call it
Pauline
here.
Dyke was just working
Yeah.
her heart out, and I attended a ice cream social on the steps of the library museum, and joined the Historical Society that night. And Pauline was really needing help, and so I took on the task of writing an article for the canning business.
Yeah.
and I learned a lot, although I knew a little bit, but not very much, because that was a little bit before my time.
Sure.
And but still, I found that the way my mom and my aunt were doing things was very much like the old canning people did. I didn't know that until later. And in fact, the little peeler that Mom had, we used it all the time. I didn't know then that it was a tomato canning peeler. But anyway, I did do that, and then I helped with the schools, getting that together for the history book. My dad had accumulated, he took things out of the paper and everything. He had accumulated a lot of school pictures from the paper, and so we were able to put that all together for the book. So that was that, and plus the family histories was my main contribution, the schools and the tomato canning industry.
Sure. And again, just a wealth of information there. And then, of course, the journals we talked about the last time. I think here's what one of the journals looked like, and we talked about this. There's about 10 years. It took them about 10 years back in the 75 to 84 is what we came up with. About 25 journals, unless I don't have them all.
Well, then we published some more in recent years.
You did?
Too.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
We've done a few. It's a big job.
I need to get some of those.
It's a big
Yeah,
job.
but
And
a lot of people contributed to these. Different articles were done by different people,
Yes.
and there's one there. Gilbert Cruz
Yep.
did the Great Depression
yes.
and so forth. Mr. Bolson, I know, did a lot.
Yes,
He was
Mr.
very
Bolson, he was very active.
Yes.
Long at the same time my dad
right.
was.
Just a lot of great information, and
And Martha McGrath.
Yes.
She did such a great job.
Yep. So you became the director when you got the building then, pretty much.
Yeah,
97.
Diana Barnett did it the first year. I think she was the only one, and then Mom passed away, and so they twisted my arm to start.
Uh-huh.
And that was we were getting the building. It was in a lot of stuff to be done. Well, I know they were already working on it even when I got involved. Getting the building ready.
Mhm.
And I just remember when I started on January 1st, there was about that much plaster dust on the floor because they had all replastered and everything. So I kind of hit the ground running with that. But I had a lot of help, a lot of good help. And we had work days and got that all cleaned up. And then we cleaned all the old oils. Remember how they used to do the floors where they were just oiled? Cleaned all that off and got a finish. Barnes has put a finish on it for us. And went from there.
That's right. And Linda, your dad, Uncle Don, was very instrumental in helping with that remodel project. I remember.
Uncle Bob,
Okay, Bob and E.L. Rost as well.
Delmer and Merle on
Okay,
my mom's side.
gotcha. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So the building had been the Carnegie Library. Marshfield had a fundraising campaign to raise money to build the new library, and then that building became available.
Mhm.
The city owns the building, right? Officially, they did.
They did.
Now we got it. I forgot what year that was. It's been about 10 years ago.
Okay,
or so,
great,
and
good,
They needed it too.
good.
Finally, we had to show how much we had put into that. We worked up a whole
Right.
a lot of information showing what we had done, the repairs we'd made, the upkeep, everything that we had contributed to the building. And then, of course, you had your in-kind labor force
Sure.
too. It amounted to a lot of
Lot of
money.
work.
And then in addition, what does the city want with an old building?
It's,
It's more of a liability than
Right.
anything. So they
Yeah.
very graciously deeded it to
Awesome.
us.
that's great.
And so we're totally,
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And
Mhm.
and of course, you as being the director, I'm sure you got to do a lot of that paperwork
I
and
did do
you
all
know,
of
all
that.
of it.
Yes, all of that. It's a
Wow.
monumental task. But thankfully, we could go back to newsletters and things and minutes.
Yeah.
And know when we did, we've
Right.
replaced all the steps. Most people would not realize that, but those steps are new, done maybe, 15
Mhm.
years ago or something
And I
like
remember
that.
the doors were new. I remember when
Doors were
you
new,
had
yes.
I think you even had a ceremony or something.
Yes,
seemed
they were
like.
done, John Dickey donated for the
Mhm.
doors, and they were done in memory of Ella Dickey.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Then you got the annex building.
Yes, now we just rent that though.
Yeah, I understand. But
Yeah. Yeah, we had a room, we started out with a room in the back just for research. Research was really my first love, more than the museum.
yeah.
Museum was more of a burden, you might say. But
Yes,
I
I
love-
understand that.
I love I bet you do now. the research, first we had a room in the back. We outgrew that. They have it as a ladies' room now. That was our first research room, and then we moved over into the what we call the Marshfield room downstairs. It used to be the little children's what they call it, children's hour.
Oh, yeah.
And then when we got the building next door, then we moved everything research related over
Right.
to that.
Now, did you go to kindergarten down there in the basement?
I did not.
You didn't go?
No.
I didn't either. I missed kindergarten here in Marshfield, but several of my classmates did, and
We've got
the next
pictures.
year they started, I believe, somewhere in the mid '60s they started the kindergarten in the public school.
Yeah. And once they started the public schools, then Miss Tackett kind of
Yeah.
disbanded.
Kind of
the rest
retired or
them.
whatever. But
We have pictures on the wall there of all those classes
Uh-huh.
though, and it's so interesting because you see the business people here in
Yeah.
Springfield and around,
Absolutely.
you know, that are in those kindergarten
Absolutely.
kindergarten
Yeah.
classes.
so you got the building up, you got it going, and things are going really well. Now, so Linda, you were the director of the Chamber of Commerce a little bit prior to that when President Bush came, correct?
Yes, yeah.
So that was in '91. So we didn't have the museum yet, but you tell us a little bit about that. And Linda, were you involved at all? Was the Historical Society involved at all yet?
Not
No,
then.
not then. You didn't have a building yet. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that as being the chamber director during that event. I mean, that would have been quite an exciting time.
It was. It was
Yeah.
fun. Of course, we had already started working on the 4th for that year. The chamber office at that time was in the old radio station there on
Hubble Drive.
Harbor Drive, right? John Thompson's office was in there. So I was driving on my way in. I was living at Conway at the time, and I heard on the radio that President Bush was coming to a 4th of July celebration in Springfield. And I'm going, Springfield doesn't have a 4th of July
Not really.
celebration.
No, not a big one.
So I walked into the building and I walked over to John's office and knocked on the door and I said, do we need to talk? And he said, yeah, come on in. And so, yeah, he said, this is strict confidence. It can't get out just yet. So we talked a little bit, decided to call Barth. We talked about who would be good to come in and help with some things.
Mhm.
So-
Professional coordinator.
yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, that was pretty awesome. And of course, in the city and the county, and Daddy at the time was county commissioner.
Right. Mhm.
So, yeah, it was crazy because we kind of had to do all that in just a couple of weeks. They kept saying, we don't want to change it any more than we absolutely have to. And they were going to work with. People had warned us, it'll be a nightmare. But they were okay. I mean,
John Ashcroft was governor, I believe, and Roy Blunt was the Secretary of State at
yes,
the time.
that's right.
See, Mel Hancock was our congressman. Our senators were Danforth and I guess Kit Bond were senators.
Yeah.
And so probably, I mean, to pick Marshfield, Missouri, what an honor. I mean, and I heard Roy Beck talk at the Cherry Festival that you were on a panel with your dad and Wayne Plunkett, and he said, the opportunities to have the President of the United States in your town on the 4th of July are very, very minimal. Walking in a parade, he said, I mean, he talked like it may have only happened a couple of times in the history of our nation, because generally they're at Camp David or they're somewhere, or some big event somewhere, but to walk in a hometown's rural parade is really remarkable to have that. So
Yeah, we probably need to publicize that a little bit more,
Yeah,
the draw.
yeah, really,
Marshfield.
really, it's quite a deal.
Yeah,
And yeah, there's a booklet out that was done. I don't have it here handy. I've got it, but a booklet put out that was done really well by the Marshfield Mail,
right.
and it was timelines of the parade, history of the parade. I'd certainly encourage. I'm sure you have a copy of that at the Historical Society. I'm sure. Sure you'd be glad to check that out or let people review that. But it's a really good document of that event and all kinds of pictures. I was fortunate enough to be on one of the drivers for some of the dignitaries, I guess. So it was a great time. But,
It was truly a community
It really was,
Because
yeah.
there were so many people that you don't hear about their names.
Mhm.
Even John, I mean, if it wasn't for John, it wouldn't have happened.
Wouldn't have happened without John Thompson's
Right,
involvement and
yeah.
his connection to the Blunts and
Yeah.
Governor Ashcroft probably,
Right.
and yeah, it definitely was the reason probably. So
Fun time.
yeah. So you were the chamber director for how long? You remember? roughly?
About 4 or 5 years.
5 years.
Mhm.
And the parade is, of course, that's the granddaddy of what you do probably, or did back then at
Yes.
least.
We did harvest days back then also,
Mhm.
and the Christmas parade, and yeah, but definitely, and that's when we brought in the rodeo also.
Oh,
during
you
that
moved it?
time.
Okay,
Yeah,
during
moved
that
it,
time
yeah,
frame. Gotcha. Okay.
And, Craig Bell was very. Uh,
He was probably the president
yeah,
that
he
year,
was,
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was somewhat involved, but
Okay, yeah.
I know the parade, we moved it from the normal route that we had been using, like we do now from the element. They started it down at the
They
fairgrounds.
did, yeah.
And I know the bands didn't like that because you had to climb the hill from the fairgrounds to get to the square, and it made it difficult, so they moved it back after that. But
Yeah.
I think at the time they, for whatever reason, it may have had to do with the security
They
for the
did,
president.
yeah,
They didn't.
yeah,
They
yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
didn't want it to be as long, and they wanted to be able to keep more security. For some reason, they thought that was a better route.
And you
what-
had to pre-register for it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we were in the parade,
Yeah.
driving our little car. And
Yes.
Yeah, and that was kind of, coming up that hill was kind of challenging.
It was, yeah, it
too.
was.
Yeah.
But they wanted the security, and everyone had to be registered. I know there was one gentleman that was, every year, he was always in the parade. But he didn't register, he never had them before, so they kind of gave him a hard time about it, and it was one of our local businessmen, he didn't like it too good.
Yeah. Those are the little stories that nobody really knows that are interesting, though, and kind of fun.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember, Linda, the Centennial Parade? Did they start it at the fairgrounds? Was there?
I wasn't over
Don't
there.
remember then.
I wasn't.
It seemed
over
like
here.
They did.
They did.
Daddy's got pictures.
Yeah,
of
and
it. Yeah.
of course that was one reason they started it there. And then, if I'm not mistaken, they may have started it and ended it there because they had the pageant down there during the Centennial. They did a lot at the
Right,
fairgrounds.
they did, yeah.
And if you read the history of the parade, there was a lot of involvement by that. They called that like Long Grove or something. When you go back and look early on, that part of town, which probably wasn't much of a town that had grown that far yet, but it was called Long Grove. I don't know why. I think it was Long Grove or New Grove, but it's in some of those
New to
books.
me.
The springs that the cyclone caused.
Shackleford
was-
Springs.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
No, Mineral Springs.
Minerals. That was at the
Into
park.
Play Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Into Play Street. They
Right.
got a fence around it now. That's where they believe that to be. the
Okay,
Mineral
but
Springs.
Shackleford was over on Bedford.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was two in that area.
Yeah, Shackleford Spring really didn't have anything to do with the cyclone as far as I know.
I see. Okay.
It was named
But-
Shackleford for the people that settled there.
Mhm.
Or settled.
And then the parade started at the school here on this campus back in the 60s before we moved it to the elementary school.
Okay.
And I know that was back in the day when they still had trains traveling more frequent then. And there was numerous times the parade would be held up because a train would be coming through. So that's, I think, part of the reason they made the decision to move it to the elementary school
Yeah, sure.
parking lot, and which made the parade a lot longer.
Yeah.
But of course, the parade's gotten longer and bigger and
Yeah.
needed that extra length, I guess.
And the
But-
space, the place to line up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, this historical society, in addition to having a museum, you also have events like your ice cream socials and things like that. Tell us a little bit. And you still have school kids come in after, like, for field trips and what have you. Tell us a little bit about all that.
Well, why don't you go ahead, Linda, since you're in.
Well, the kids come in May, the first part of May,
Right.
and it's kindergarten through fifth, and it's usually 3 days, 3 different days, and
Each school has a day now.
yeah.
Okay.
Early on, we were banking, and we went all day long. But it developed over time. Lori Herring was excellent at that, and developed over time. Where now you have a day for each school, and it just goes to about 12:30, something like that. Much easier to deal with. But
Still have folks come in and show them some of the trades, or like they
Yes.
used to do. Yeah,
Yeah.
to talk about an individual
Yeah.
or whatever, we did like Edmund Hubble or
yeah.
different ones like that are notable people that you want the kids to kind of
Mm-hmm.
remember. And
That's really good. It's really
It
good.
is, yeah.
In your opinion, or in your, what do you think is one of the most interesting things out of all the times you've been over there? As far as memorabilia or events, what's the most, other than the president's visit, that would obviously be, but I guess you didn't have a museum yet, but is there something over there that's just really, when you think about it, it's just really more interesting than anything else?
well, I think so. I have my
Your favorites?
specials
Yeah.
there, I guess that's that I had contributed to. When I started, one things that I really wanted to do was set up the exhibit for the Fordland Air Base,
Oh,
because so many people didn't even know that it existed. And I
That's
had two
great.
brother-in-laws that were stationed there, married my sisters.
Mhm.
So, I kind of had some firsthand knowledge of it. I'd been there a few times. I was too young to be dating at the time, but I got to tag along a little bit. But I really wanted that and did. And I think that's been an interesting part of our county history. And once it's been 3 or 4 years ago, we had a roundtable discussion on the Fordland Air Base and collected, put together a book
Yeah.
on it, which we have on exhibit there.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting. You would not believe how many marriages took place here, because the guys want the girls, and they
Really?
married and they stayed here.
Interesting. So
So
the guys were stationed at Fordland at the
Fordland.
air base.
Uh-huh.
They met a local girl,
yes, they
got married, and stayed.
Oh, yes,
Huh.
many, and I could name a few for you.
Yeah.
But Shirley Van Diglen, John was
Yeah,
and even Don Vance Senior was the
Really?
NCO, I think they call it, for a period of time there.
Really?
And there was a Whittington, and I don't know. There's
Yeah.
Graybill.
Oh, Phil Graybill and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, Connie.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so many married the girls here.
Yeah.
And stayed here.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm having trouble thinking of my names today, they came here from West Virginia, and they stayed and said they had nothing to go back to. They felt like they were in heaven here.
Yeah.
Out there it was just the coal mines to go back to.
Yeah.
And so this was wonderful for them.
That's
it was,
awesome.
but that was one of my first things that I wanted to do and did. And then I think the Edmund Hubble exhibit is the other thing,
Sure.
because
Sure.
he was born here in Marshfield.
And we still have some families that are connected to Edwin, right? The Jumps and
Yeah, it's the kind of distance. James. On the
James
side.
side.
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
on the James side.
And that's
yeah,
the
Jumps.
that's the James that was the jeweler,
That was some relation.
Son of 'em.
Dr. James.
Dr. James.
Was Edwin's mother's father.
Okay.
That's the reason they lived in Springfield at the time, but they came down to Marshfield for his birth.
Oh.
And then very soon after that, they moved to Marshfield. And they lived here about the first 9 years of his life. But yeah, Dr. James and the James that had the jewelry store,
Yeah.
it's all related.
Same family.
Yes.
So Edwin they lived here till he was 9?
Around 9.
Around 9.
age.
Fourth grade, I always
He
heard.
attended
Yeah.
school here. Yes, he did.
He did attend in
Yes,
this
he
building.
did.
Good.
And he was, yes.
We can put that on our.
Yes.
Well,
our map
this
then.
building, no, because.
Oh, it would have been before this
Yeah,
building, because this was 1916. It would have been the old building.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
That's right, because he was
He was born in
born-
83,
1883.
so he would have attended, about
Yeah.
1890. up
Yeah,
through there.
that's right. Okay.
Yeah, and then they moved, I think, to Illinois, different places, But the fact that such famous astronomer,
Oh.
was born right here in Marshfield,
Absolutely,
Missouri.
that's right.
And we had a group come from Japan back a few years ago, just to film right here.
Mhm.
And they gave us a DVD of it, but unfortunately, they were supposed to have subtitles in English, but it didn't have.
Uh-huh.
But they had that, and then not too long ago, I had an interview from the Route 66 magazine. I haven't heard that yet, but anyway, it's definitely a draw for
You bet.
Marshfield.
You bet it is. And of course, speaking of Route 66, the Centennial is going to be held in 2026, and I'm fortunate enough to be on the state committee.
Are
So
you?
yeah, the commission. So we're looking forward to that. We're working right now, doing some preliminary stuff, getting ready for that. So
So let me tell you a little bit about that then.
okay, let's do it. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll cover a little bit more if it's okay. Back in the 50s, Marshfield brochure said Marshfield, top of the Ozarks. You know, that was our byline, you might
Right,
say.
right.
And Dale Freeman, who was a reporter for the Springfield News Leader, he did a wonderful article on Marshfield. So the heading line was, Marshfield has the right to claim top of the Ozarks. And it's because our courthouse is the highest elevation courthouse in the state of Missouri. And speaking of Route 66, for 900 miles, the highest point historically on Route 66 for 900 miles is right out there at the golf course.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting.
It is
And also on I-44, Marshfield has the highest elevation east of the Rockies.
Okay.
And so
Yeah,
I think that's
that's-
very interesting.
I've
too.
heard a lot of that, and of course, when Herman and Mrs. Cleta Pierce
Yeah.
owned the Main Course Cafe,
Yes.
which the building they tore down
Yes.
a couple 3 years ago, but he claimed in those brochures in his ads, right, that that highest point was
Yeah.
right there at the cash register.
Yeah.
That's what I always
And
I think it's in one of those brochures from those
I want to
days.
clarify that when I
Yeah.
say historically,
Yes.
if you don't mind,
No, no,
I'll
no.
clarify that. You know, Tomahawk Mountain,
Uh-huh.
highest point in Missouri.
Right.
Dennis Amsinger, we had interactions together, you
Right.
know, and I was always trying
Yeah.
to search something.
Tremendous guy. Just a
Yes,
tremendous person.
and quite a loss for
Yes.
the county, really. But I was talking about the Route 66, highest point on Route 66, and he said, well, actually now, you know, with all the new technology they have to do
Yeah.
things like that, he said, well, actually now, there's a place up there along about where Exotic Animal Paradise is, that's just a little bit higher
Really?
than that. But he said, he told me this, I thought it was a cute story. He, using that same technology, has found a place out north of Seymour that's actually higher than Tomahawk Mountain. So he went to the state to call that to their attention. They said, well, we're not going to change history.
Not gonna change it.
Not going to change history. So that's the reason
Yeah.
I say historically,
Right.
right there.
Well, that's a good. I'm glad you told me that, because I've done a little bit of research on the highest elevations in Missouri, and you're right. Tomahawk's #1, and I think that point it's actually southeast of Seymour in the Cedar Gap area.
Oh, really?
It's like #3 in what I've Googled.
Okay.
But now Dennis is probably right. It may actually be higher. But and then there's also a place north that's in the top 5. But between those two places, and then if you come back into Marshfield, right over here, actually where farmland hits a highway, and then Hosmer Hill is also. You're talking about all these points are in the top 50 in Missouri. I mean, they're all really high.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then of course the water running 4 directions from the courthouse
Yes.
and end up in 4 rivers. That is all true. I mean,
And
there's.
that goes into the lakes,
Mhm.
which Marshfield is right in the hub within an hour of
About 1
almost
hour.
every
That's
lake.
right.
One
That's
of them
right.
about an hour and a half.
Mr. Bolson did a lot of research
He
on
did.
the geography and the watersheds, and I know some of that's in these books that
We
you,
have
that-
his book that he
yeah,
put together.
yeah, he's remarkable. Where the water, how it travels underground, and he did a lot of that work. And yeah, it's really cool. Well, thank you. It's just really interesting, the information that you're sharing with us today. Linda, how about you? Since you've been the director, what have you found over there in the building that is really interesting, that you just think is something that nobody else has, or that really piques your interest?
There was a little article, or not an article, but an item that, and I don't really know if it has that much to do with Westford County, but I found it underneath some of the Howell, and on the display there that we had. And we pulled it down, and we couldn't figure out what it was. It's a little box about like that, and it had a little stack on it, like a smokestack. So we started Googling and finally found out that it's a little projector that, like a slide projector, and they would take glass slides and put them there, but the light that shone through that was through a candle. And
Really?
yeah, it just yeah, and so we've got some glass slides, but none of them that fit in that because this is just really small.
So 1800s then,
Yeah,
would be
yes,
before
uh-huh,
electricity
yeah.
or anything.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's
'cause it
that
was.
is cool.
So there's just little things like that, and you'll run across something you'll think, oh, I've never seen that before, but I mean you probably have.
Right.
There's just so much to
Yeah.
remember
Remember.
that, and Linda kind of had things in chronological order. Well, I'm not geared that way. I can't do that. So I kind of started doing things by items. If it had to do with Hubble, we tried to put it
Yeah.
all over there. If it
Yeah.
was military, all over there, and that way I can at least know the area that it's
Right,
in. I can
right.
go to that.
You know, the memorabilia, the stuff, you get a lot of stuff donated, pictures. I know you've posted a lot of pictures. Does anybody recognize this person or whatever? How in the world, what, you have hundreds of them, thousands of them, or what?
We have hundreds of them, and so many of them, no names or
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
But on those, the thing that I have found interesting is the different studios that was here in Marshfield, and I did not realize that we had that many
Yeah.
photography studios.
Right.
Yeah, one of the cases downstairs, there's several right there in the case of them.
Yeah.
We've got pictures of like my grandparents on the Fraker side, and I think even maybe on the Rost side where they took pictures and had the same background. And it was done by the same studio,
Yes.
maybe at the same time. Maybe it was an event where someone got married or whatever. And I've seen, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't there a studio where the Singer Auto Parts was that had been a funeral home or was going to be, or I think there was a studio, McMahon Funeral Home, and I think that building had a studio at one time, maybe before or after that. But the other thing that I think, I don't know if you're ready to share this or not, but your dad's building this scale model of the square. Tell us about that. This is really interesting for a 92-year-old guy to be able to continue to still do this.
It is.
And it's remarkable. Tell us about it.
It is. I'm just so excited for him to get it finished. And back in the winter when it was cooler, he would say, I don't know if I'm going to get it done or not.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, we've taken pictures of each part of the square. And then he has built a little section. Each one's about that long. So like from where Complete Realty is down to where Singers used to be. And it's about like that. And he's got one for each one. And then in the middle, that's the courthouse. And he said the other day, he said, I'm going to put the sidewalks in the streets. So
That's amazing.
it really is.
And I've seen some of his work. He did a house or a model for Aunt Phoebe.
Yes.
And I mean,
Yeah.
remarkable. I mean,
Callaway
very
cabin.
detailed work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the
cabin.
Callaway. Yeah, he
Yeah,
did the
he
Callaway
did.
cabin. That's right. And
It's-
so this is really going to be interesting. And
Yeah.
you said that he was going to put on each section. It'll be a model of the business today, but he'll also list the previous
right.
ones,
Uh-huh.
which I think is great historical.
Oh, it is, yeah. And
endeavor.
then, yeah,
Yeah.
Bill McFadden and Laura Beth Smith and Amy Ragsdale are also going back through the old phone books and looking to make
Yeah.
sure that we're getting all of those businesses.
That's
And then we're
awesome.
going through some of the old history books and trying to find out the different businesses. And then Bill and the Martins, I can't think of her name right now. They bring us all this information on Mr. Hubble, and they've got some Sanborn maps. And so we can take those and look way back.
It's just a lot of work. I mean, you got a lot of people doing a lot of work, and,
Yeah,
and I think people don't really realize that. I mean,
And we need so
kinda-
many more.
we kind of almost take it for granted,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
that's
yes.
amazing. It's great. Landon, how we doing on time? Okay, we're doing great. I might mention that today we've got Landon Fraker here as our producer and technical expert. Logan Fraker couldn't make it today, so it's great to have a couple of IT guys in the family that can take over if one can't be here. So thank you, Landon. What else comes to mind about growing up in Marshfield? Linda, you graduated in 1971.
70. Yeah.
You were 61, right, Linda? And tell me a little bit about, growing up in high school. What'd you do? Where'd you hang out? Some of the businesses. I know we had the Dairy Princess and the big wig.
The big wig, yeah.
That we would hang out at, and I was just a young feller then, but still remember him very well.
Well, and we was talking about the square. That was your social life. I think, from way even back. I know when Mom and Daddy was growing up. Maybe even more so then, because they had the sweet shop, and that was for the kids. I think basically. My grandson Johnny the other day said something about the cube, and I said, "The cube?" And he said, "Yeah, down there where Daddy's shop here, the business is." And I said, "Oh, the square." And he said, "Square cube." But and Josie, I had said something about the square, and she did not realize why that was so important, because that's you can go down and get your license, but other than that, it's not part of their lives anymore.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of sad.
it is sad, yeah,
It is
because
sad.
you couldn't wait till Friday night and Saturday night when you could,
Cruise the Square.
yeah.
Cruise the Square.
And of
Yeah,
course
it
the theater
sweet
was
shop.
Sweet Shops.
Yeah.
The theater was
Right.
Ritz was there.
Ritz was there for a long time, yeah.
But mainly Cruise the Square.
Yeah.
You might pull in once in a while and sit
Yeah.
and talk a little bit.
Right, yeah.
Don Bruce was the night watchman. There was never any problems or anything.
Halloween night maybe. But
Yeah, they did some things that we wouldn't think about doing now, but they
right.
didn't mean them for meanness,
No.
but I never did do anything like that.
I can't
But
imagine.
I've heard of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's my take on it too.
That's your story.
That's
you're
my
sticking to
story.
it.
That's right. That's right.
But
Well-
I think our kids now miss out on that.
They do,
that,
they do.
I would love to see some of those traditions brought back.
Yeah, but some things you really can't.
No.
Progress doesn't allow it.
No.
The technology, I think, it's been so good to be able to do this today and
It is.
everything, but I think it's taken something away from the kids too, that they spend most of the time doing that instead of interacting.
And our forefathers were probably saying that about us.
That could be, yeah.
Probably wanted to. We don't need modern plumbing. We don't need indoor plumbing. That outhouse served our family
Yeah,
for generations.
Exactly.
Why would you
Don't
want to
need-
do all that in
Right.
a house?
Yeah, exactly.
Don't need the movies,
Uh-uh.
their only activities, things was to go to church and maybe if
Mm-hmm.
some little musical thing, maybe come to town or mineral show, what do we kind of call it
Minstrel.
back then?
Minstrel show.
That
Well,
would be
the theaters, when Ritz Theater was built, it was alive. It was built for live performances. Initially it had a stage, and that's what they did. And then of course they converted them into the movie houses, 1920s or whatever. But that's how it all was. All of them were in the early
Blind,
days.
Blind Boone.
Yes, blind.
Mhm.
The playing ball though was a big thing.
Playing ball.
Maybe before my time, a little bit, because I don't remember it being that big when I was around, but I know back in the days of, let's say the 30s and 40s, I mean, playing softball was a big thing. I've seen it in the papers, and how the competition between the different town teams,
Yeah.
and it was so interesting. And I know I know one man, Argus Mannery, he was, he was really heavy into that. And
John's
Bill,
dad.
yes, Johnny Bill, he really liked the playing ball too. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that I was told right that he had an offer to play professional,
Really?
but he didn't want to leave his family.
Yeah.
I could be
Interesting.
mistaken about that, but I
Interesting.
believe that.
What memorabilia or information have you learned about, say, World War II or Vietnam since being over there? I know you probably had a lot of information come in, or
We do have a
Folks come
section
in.
just on military
Yeah.
and the research. I mean, you have displays in the museum as well, but in the research center. And Connie and Carm, they just recently put together that book on any person that died in any war. It's a wonderful, wonderful little book. It's a hardback book,
Wow.
good size.
It's
It's
good size, yeah.
honoring
It's-
our fallen. I
Yeah.
think.
oh yeah,
And it's
Oh,
very
yeah.
nice.
Awesome.
She did an excellent job on it. And one of the boys in my class, David Knight, he was one that
David,
that
yeah.
was killed in Vietnam.
mm-hmm.
But even earlier, there was information put together on Vietnam, and we have that in our research center. And the Civil War, in any of the wars, we have it on the bar there.
There was a plaque in this building years ago of it was either 8 or maybe 10, could have been 10 young men that died in the Vietnam War.
Is that right?
Yeah, and the plaque, it had kind of got lost, moved around, scratched, whatever. So I took it to the courthouse, and we hung it in the lobby of the courthouse by the plaque that has all the names of those that served in World War One.
Yeah.
And that was back, I think, when I was commissioner, or maybe right after. But anyway, it's a good place for it. But those, and then we did at Reunion Fest a few years ago. We honored those men and had family members come and
Yes, I remember.
had a little trivet or a wall plaque, something that we had presented to them. But those young men shouldn't be forgotten. And yeah, David Knight certainly was one of them. Mr. Gower was one of them. And speaking of that, I'm going to read something because we have a little bit of time left, if it's okay with you guys. Darlene Gower Anderson, and that would have been her brother that was killed, one of those 8 or 10 boys in the Vietnam conflict or war. She wrote a poem a few years ago, back in 2017, and gave me a copy of it. And I wanted to read this just because she took the time to do it, and I think it's very fitting with you two here today. We're in this building. She attended school here, graduated, I believe it was in 1951. And so I'm going to take just a minute and read this poem, if it's okay with you. It's called Remembering Marshfield Schools by Darlene Anderson. Looking back into the 30s when my education did start, I still have cherished memories locked away in my heart. In a humble location in the country that is referred to as rural, to me it was more than just an okay kind of school. A one-room schoolhouse with one teacher for grades from 1 to 8, having to go outside for water and use the restrooms may seem such a dismal fate. But then there was a potbelly stove that kept us cozy and close, and recess times where nature's acres of medicine was the best kinds of dosed. From our first primer that we learned to read, we quickly felt we were bound to succeed. Giving credit to the curriculum for stories about Dick and Jane helped us to understand what we all had to gain. Learning arithmetic was really big. We could help out on the farm by counting every cow, chicken, and pig. Learning how to handle a pencil, spell words, write stories, sing songs, and use scissors while being as careful as could be, and draw and color pictures for everyone to see. Learning how to get along with all those who became lifelong friends, regardless of their economics, age, sex, or the color of their skin. At recess, we strengthened our bodies by playing softball, tag, flying poochma, or flying Dutchman, or red line. We voted to see which one to play, which was so democratic and politically fine. We got to be in Christmas plays and pie supper programs. So who cared about Hollywood when there was such a higher bar? We learned about being global through our weekly geography games. The winter was on top of the world, and what we all did claim. After this country education, we got to decide if we wanted 4 more years of school called high. It was an option that we quickly did buy. Mixing country and city resources was exciting to say the least. More subjects and activities were a continual learning feast. A big 3-story building with so many rooms to find each day, but the sophomores, juniors, and seniors helped we green freshmen find our way. We always liked to get together in those hallowed halls or congregate across the street on the Hosmer rock walls. We'll let you talk about that, Linda. We had great teachers and administrative staff seriously preparing for us life, but it sometimes made us laugh. We really didn't understand how much some things did matter. We were too concerned about what we read in the Blue Jay Chatter. Marshfield school spirit never had to be taught. From a very strong tradition, it was quickly caught. We learned to do all that was right, and to this very day we know we still bleed blue and white. Even with a big campus, including a cafeteria and music rooms outside, a softball field a half-mile away, and many other places to hide. We would have liked to have had it extended north across the railroad tracks so we could go to Circle the Square and then come right back. Unless we decided to make another stop for some special nutrition at our favorite sweet shop. 4 generations later, we're still thanking Marshfield for the kind of schools they do provide and for teaching us to fit into civilization wherever we do reside. Webster County is the Webster is the county, Marshfield is the seat, and from any kind of educational standard, Marshfield schools and people would be very hard to beat.
Very good.
April 22nd of 17.
Very good.
We want to thank Darlene for that, and very, very thoughtful, and that she gave us a copy of that. So
She has written a book and gave us a copy of that that we have on display, and then also a quilt that they received, her and Bill, when they got married, that his grandmother
oh wow.
put together. It's
Yeah.
beautiful quilt,
Yeah.
and it's on display there at the.
Tell us about the Hosmer Walls, Linda.
Well, I remember being there. I never did sit on it, but I've heard stories about, and Mitzi may have told me this, and how Mrs. Hosmer was just, I guess, the sweetest could be.
Yeah.
Mr. Hosmer could be a little bit.
I've heard that too.
And he put some grease on it.
Axle grease, yes.
Yeah, to keep the girls from sitting on the wall. Yeah, I'd heard that. Mitzi, was one of my volunteers, faithful volunteers
Oh, yeah.
for so long, even past the age of 90. I remember we honored her at one of our ice cream socials, for being such a-
Another Webster County treasurer. We hope to have her on too. I'm certainly friends with her boys, and
Yeah,
I want to see if we can get her to come on
That would
with
be
them maybe. And,
wonderful. Speaking about the freshmen and the sophomores, when I was in school, you had freshman initiation. Do you know when they had that when you were in school?
No.
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 No. Any pretty day, I don't know who decided what the day would be. The freshmen, you just showed up, and all of a sudden, this was your freshman initiation. You were taken to a room, and the sophomores got to you got to change your clothes and inside out, and put stuff on your face and mess up your hair and just do everything they could to make you
Oh
ugly.
my, yeah.
And then throughout the day, every time you met a sophomore, you had to get down on your knees and say, "We, the freshmen at 58, do the sophomores appreciate.
Oh
But
my.
if you will please excuse our looks, we will gladly carry your books."
Oh my
my-
goodness.
And you had to carry their books into to the classroom. Why I remember that.
Probably
That
sued for
years
that today.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That's
Oh
exactly what I
my
thought.
goodness.
So they had already quit doing that back even before that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Linda, when you graduated, did you still have to wear dresses? Or
Yes.
it hadn't changed
I
yet?
have not changed.
It- A year or two after that then,
And,
right?
yeah, probably.
Yeah,
so.
that was another thing. Of course, I lived in the country, 12 months out. It was cold. You just had your heater up there at the front where the bus driver was at.
Okay.
They would let us wear slacks on the bus, but we had to take them off when we got to school.
At school.
Okay, yeah.
Wow. So they had a protest. It must have been a year, or maybe 2 years after you graduated, because there was a protest, and I was hoping you might remember it, but I guess you don't. But supposedly because the girls were wanting to start wear pants or something, and the school board was involved, and they finally gave in, I think. And of course, guys had to have their hair up over their ears and all that, and this was all around the time you graduated, a little while after, I guess. Everything was changing. The culture was changing. The war was ravaging, the Vietnam War, and people were getting upset with the government and so forth.
And the
But-
boys all had to wear white socks,
Oh,
and if not, they would have to go and be sent home.
oh, really?
And the mini skirts.
Yeah.
And so I remember girls getting sent home because when
Too
you
short.
stood up, your skirt had to cover
Right.
at least the tips of your fingers.
What I remember, I was thinking when you got down on your knees, it had to touch the ground, maybe.
Yeah. But
Lots of changes.
lots of changes and things, some good and some not so good.
Exactly
You know,
right.
Yeah.
think about Vietnam and how now we look back and go, man, what a terrible time for our country. But
The boys was watching that draft, the
oh
draft
yeah,
numbers.
Yes.
yeah.
Um,
We're very fortunate that we live in a country today that we don't have the draft, and we're not forced to do things like we were back then.
I was thinking about the school teachers that we had, and I can't think of a single teacher that I didn't like. you know, they were all good teachers, and they were respectful, you know. And I think it was a great time to grow up.
I think it was too, and you know, a lot of the teachers, like I had teachers that were there when my mom and dad were here. You know, that Mrs. Deckard was our elementary principal.
Mhm.
She'd been my dad's first grade teacher,
Was that right?
and then
Clifton
you know,
Dugan.
Clifton. I mean, there's a bunch of them. It seems like they made careers and they stayed here. They were maybe their spouses worked here or business people or so forth, and they didn't move around and what have you. It was superintendent, you know, was here a long time generally, and principals and so forth. It was just a smaller, closer community.
And then we didn't have trouble. There wasn't any
Not
trouble
really.
in school.
Not really, no.
Really. I mean, there was a few incidents,
Yeah.
things that happened, but there wasn't,
No,
you know, anything bad. I
didn't have
think.
drugs yet much.
That's exactly, that's something that happened out in California. You
Yeah.
know, that you just
Yeah.
heard about it.
Just heard
you know.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was it was a wonderful time. to
It was a
grow
good
up,
time to
and
grow
one
up.
Place to be growing up.
Right.
And we're still protected from so much of that here. I mean, and we take that for granted. You know, we fuss about some things, but it's
Naive,
like,
I think.
yeah,
The real
We
world.
do. Think
But,
we just don't. We forget sometimes how great of a place we are from and have here, and hopefully everybody will remember that.
yes.
And,
One
well,
thing,
mhm.
Lyndall,
Yeah.
I'd just like to
Yes.
mention,
Yes.
the museum for years had received from Pyramid Foods, like when you go to Price Cutter,
Yes,
if you spend
yes.
over $50, they would put that
Yes.
in the thing, and so it basically the museum got right $800 to $1,000 every month.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
pretty good.
it was wonderful. Well, that program is now gone.
Oh no.
So, you know, we are in desperate need of donations and help. I mean, ideas and maybe what we could do to raise
Sure,
more money and
sure.
things like that. But would love for people to realize that the need for donations and the need for more volunteers.
Right. Right.
But yeah, that hurts, you know. I mean, that
Yeah.
basically carried most of our payments each month. You know, the rent and
Oh,
the
sure.
heat and all
Yeah.
that. So now, you know, we're having to dig deep.
I'm sure you had endowments from memorials, things like that. I'm sure you would
Yes.
love to
Yes, yeah.
as well.
I have a Century Club plaque. If anyone makes a donation of $100 or more,
Yeah.
then they can put a loved one's name on the plaque.
Sure.
But we can also set up endowments too. We
Right.
have a couple of endowments. One of them we really can't touch. It's just there for future. Hopefully someday maybe to hire a person doing what Linda
Sure.
and I have done
Yeah.
for a long time.
Wow.
Get to that need.
Right.
But administrative fund we call that, and then another fund that we can draw from the Dickey fund
Right.
somewhat. So that's something that people could consider doing. It would certainly go a long ways.
Well, that's
Helping
great.
young
I think that's something that we should all get behind, and I'll do my part to help with that if we can, and promote it, and see if we can figure out a way to get you all. There's some grants out there. I'm sure you look at from time to time.
We're starting to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
that's-
do think that's.
A lot of historic. Go to Missouri Historical Society. There's grants available for preservation of history and things like that. So
And we
Good.
did get a really good one back several years ago, when I hadn't been there too long, and the preservation grant.
Yeah.
And that did help us a lot.
good.
We
What are you all going to do for rooms? I know you're gonna outgrow what you have someday. And,
We have outgrown.
yeah.
We really have.
Yeah.
I don't know. And,
I actually had a moratorium on accepting new things, but she doesn't have a moratorium, so.
I would love.
Hard to turn it down, isn't it?
It is.
It is,
and
when you
there's-
have something that's
Yeah.
really,
uh,
you have to be careful.
Yeah.
Think about,
You don't want a flea market. You don't want it to turn
No.
into, it needs to be stuff that really,
you have to look at something, is somebody really gonna look at this?
yeah,
If you go to some of the training that they offer you.
Right.
For these positions, that's one thing they tell you to look at, is it something that will really, is it worth taking up space on the shelf?
exactly.
And that's a hard decision to
I'm
make.
sure it is, yeah.
I would love to build on to the back. I mean, there's different ways that we could do that. Would like to see that. But, yeah.
Sure. Well, Landon, it's about 2:00, isn't it? listen, ladies, thank you so much. It's been so fun. I told you it'd be easy and it'd go by fast, didn't I?
Yes, it
It just,
does.
you start thinking and talking, and it
Oh,
just
it was
becomes
fun.
a conversation like a, coffee talk or something.
Yes,
And,
yeah.
but we appreciate it. Appreciate all your time and effort, Linda B, over all the years that you served there, and I know you still help out and volunteer. And Linda, thanks for taking over. And
Yes, absolutely.
we
I
all
made an
should.
effort to
Yeah,
apply.
I'm sure it was. But I'm sure
Alrighty.
we all need to help you and support you in any way we can and preserve history. And that's what we're trying to do here. So we'll be a good partner for you, and however we can, and we'll look forward to the days ahead to continue. So,
Thank you for all you do.
absolutely. Thank you all. Landon, thanks. We'll see
Yes.
y'all next week. We'll have another special guest or two. So
That's good.
thanks.